for some AI companies, it's much easier, for example, especially for training, to just scrape large volumes because it's accessible, um, and that has a cost, especially for nonprofits, right? And like Texas Tribune is one of our, the earliest partners in this space, and they're a nonprofit. They are if they get a lot of traffic and they're getting scraped, well, who's paying for it?
Hello, and welcome to the Media Copilot. It's a podcast that explores how AI is changing media, journalism, and content creation. I'm Pete Paschal, longtime tech journalist and founder of the Media Copilot, and I'm excited to bring you fascinating conversations with fellow journalists, media executives, and the people building how the business of news will work in the future. The fundamental tension between AI companies and the media is disintermediation. So that's a fancy word for when an AI chatbot like ChatGPT or Perplexity writes a summary based on a topic instead of directing a person to a website. That's the basic thing AI services do. But if you think about it, even if the user doesn't have to read the website anymore, the chatbot does. And the thing is, chatbots don't look at ads, they don't buy subscriptions, and they sometimes don't even respect paywalls. As a content creator, what do you do about this? Well, you might want to talk to Ahmed Malik. Ahmed is the CEO of ScalePost, and his company is an intermediary between media companies and the AI services that want to ingest their data. Not only does ScalePost help publishers protect and monetize their content, it also facilitates communication between the two sides. ScalePost often hosts private discussions between media and tech executives where they can both hash out all kinds of topics, everything from business models to media trust, and what both might look like in an AI future. Sounds like my kind of group. Ahmed and I talk about several of the challenges facing media companies today with respect to AI. We confront the hard truth that AI search is killing web traffic and what kind of opportunity the rise of bot traffic represents. I also ask him about the litigation in the space and, in particular, Ziff Davis's new lawsuit against OpenAI. He's got some thoughts, especially about the special risk that AI poses to evergreen content. So stay tuned for that. I hope you find the conversation interesting. And if you do, I'd encourage you to share it with a friend or a colleague. I'd also be grateful if you'd consider subscribing to the Media Copilot newsletter if you haven't already. Links in the show notes. And if you're a journalist, media executive, or PR professional, I'd love it if you'd check out MediaCopilot.ai for specialized courses on how to use AI tools to automate your workflows, craft or enhance your content, or just work smarter. Okay, here's my conversation with Ahmed Malik, CEO of ScalePost. Ahmed, welcome to the Media Copilot.
Thanks so much, Pete. Really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. No, thank you. I'm really excited to talk to you. I'm super excited because you kind of exist kind of right where I do, right? Like sort of at the intersection of AI and media. I'm trying to explore that, figure it out, pass on everything I know. Your company, ScalePost, it's really fascinating to me. I've been dying to dive deeper with you into what you do, both officially and unofficially. I'd like to get into exactly how the company functions as kind of this mediator between content companies and AI companies. But even more interesting to me is the human element here, right? Like the relationships and the kind of the bird's eye view that you have with everything you're seeing and all the people you're talking to. So hopefully that's not too tall an order, but let's get started and let's ground ourselves a bit. Just to sort of level set to make sure everyone's familiar. Like, tell me about ScalePost. What does ScalePost do? What inspired you and your co-founder to establish the company? What was the thing in the market that needed addressing? And why don't we go from there?
Absolutely. No, it's certainly exciting to be here. And so, ScalePost, broadly speaking, in addition to specific products, so we basically have a goal to help publishers, protect their content and then monetize it. And fits in a broader category of generally helping with this new generative AI world and helping content owners thrive in that. What can we do to do
Mhm.
that? And how it started is that we all are familiar with how generative AI companies grow, and then they need a lot of access to content and data, right? And on a very, very high level, any AI system, has like three parts. They need compute, they need a
Hmm.
model, and now it's a lot of generative AI models. The third thing is data, and that the first two have been pretty much, there's only so many players you can work with. Data is not necessarily a commodity thing, and it's still, you need access to that data and content. And then for news media, for publishers, that their content is like an input to a lot of these models. And we saw that very early on when the AI was developing. um, the key that started was trying to see where most AI companies that are not, the traditional big generative AI names. I give you an example of, my wife, she has a dental AI startup. They train on a lot of dental data, right? And I
Okay.
saw them build that whole practice. Dentists, they have, I think, 100 plus dentists even right now, analytic images, patient notes, right? And that's just simply not available for free on the internet to scrape. It's very expensive to do that. I start seeing a pattern where a lot of news media, publisher, different types of publisher content is just being scraped up, and we saw that that's not going to probably be sustainable for
Hmm.
one side especially. And we start seeing some deals in the market, right? We're like, okay, Associated Press paved the way with the OpenAI partnership.
Right.
And we kind of started doing some detail into like, how does this solve the problem for everybody else, right? And so Axel
Hmm.
Springer in December, we sprung into action. Like, okay, this is great. We've been validated our thesis that a lot of these AI companies want to get access officially. And you've seen, Pete, you've been to some of the events that we host. We have a kind of a superpower where we've been, my co-founder Zach and I have built a network, and we used to do a lot of events around this very topic. We were able to pick up the phone and call a lot of our partners and on both sides and figure out, okay, this needs a platform, and that's how
Hmm.
ScalePost came into being. And now we're doing so many more, so much more.
Yeah, it's that's an incredible superpower, honestly, having come to some of your unofficial events and just the sort of sheer power of the folks who are both in tech and in content, sort of trading thoughts. Just really, really smart. But I want to zero in on like one part of your name, actually, which is scale, right? Because you talked about you were seeing these deals sort of happen in the early days of, I guess it's early days sounds a year and a half ago or something, right?
Right.
But that you kind of quickly saw, as I'm sure as everyone did, like, oh, this is neat. It's clearly sort of getting ahead of a problem and solving a problem at the same time, but it's also like, how does this scale? Like there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of content creators on the internet. Sort of, a lot of them are consolidated into major publishers, but it is sort of one of those things where even if you restricted yourself above a certain level, you're still looking at thousands and thousands, right? So it's kind of this issue of like, oh, you need some kind of platform and some kind of solution that is, if not self-serve, at least close to that, because you can't just sort of get on a Zoom every time you want to do this and then get some lawyers and do whatever. You can do that with the big guys, but not everybody. So there's sort of a huge problem to solve in addition to sort of the conceptual problem. And can you talk a little bit about how ScalePost sort of helps address that?
Absolutely. So ScalePost, the scale name was very important, to be in the name as well. Hence, we kind of came up with this clever play on, the this post and that post. We're like, we're the scale posts, right? So,
Mhm.
it's very dear to us to unlock that, and basically our job is to, in really like tech terms, I guess, remove friction from this whole supply chain, and data acquisition and content acquisition. And again, for the media publisher, that's one part of the equation for us. And then we're doing a lot of exciting value add things, which we'll talk about soon, where we saw that even when there's big budgets on the AI side, right? Again, thanks to the
Mhm.
network, we're able to
Right.
pick up the phone, talk to all those folks. You just like you said, getting on these Zooms and scale. If one-on-one scaling simply does not work, it has not worked. It's been like 2.5 years since this whole thing came about, I guess, with generative AI. It still has not worked, right? Because
Mhm.
that one-on-one deal making is just not scalable. So the scale will essentially does come from that platform. Now, having said that, it doesn't mean that we just keep signing up a lot of publishers and just like wait for good things to happen, right? That's just not
Yeah.
working or cannot work. What we've understood very well from day one is that we need to work with both parties, and that's what we've been doing. Our job is to unlock opportunities, new types for content publishers, and that's we're well past even the news. We have news, a lot of news media partners, other types of content owners as well. Whoever's content is valuable, they get those opportunities. So we have become very good at. We started off understanding needs within these AI companies and
Mm-hmm.
unlocking and solving for those, and that's helped us deliver, a lot of kind of partnerships in a short amount of time. So that's where we're very good at understanding different layers of, okay, so and so kind of company, now they need multimodal data. So that literally
Mm-hmm.
forced us to open up to, it wasn't in our immediate plan to get into the
Right.
video, audio, image, as well, but it was very obvious to us that our partners have assets that are very valuable to the other side, but it needs a lot of work, and the back
Yeah.
end needs to be integrated, and there's a lot of technical lifting, and as well as human level relationships. So we were very demand led, right? So that's what really helped us kick off, in a big way.
Nice. And how give me a little bit of a sense of the space you're in. I know it's kind of this interesting bit of like where AI encounters content and how it siphons it up. It's a very active space, even if it is sort of narrowly focused. How do you differentiate yourself from like other players that sort of play in here? There's, as you describe what you do, it's like it's probably not a precise one-to-one analogy, but you think about players like ProRata and Tollbit and other people sort of in this orbit. What is your sort of unique value proposition there?
So first of all, it's awesome to see the space grow. I will say that we're very excited, and it's a huge spot. We're actually excited and happy to see all the players, and even more than the ones you mentioned.
Hmm.
And we've been very collaborative, as well. So it helps the publisher. Remember, our goal has been and will be, basically taking, helping publishers of various types, content owners, maximize value from this new Gen AI world, right? Which ranges from monetization of content to even protecting your content. There's various angles. So everything keeps going
Hmm.
back to that vision. And the main differentiation would be, as I just mentioned, where we're not just focus on, let's say, one vertical, or, like, let's say, RAG or training only. Content
Hmm.
owners have data that is valuable for different use cases. Our job has been to unlock those use cases with the AI companies, help them ingest that data. I'll give you an example. We work with, some Fortune 10 companies as well, and they don't have the ability to just ingest like a small amount of data from one partner. So our job
Hmm.
has been to aggregate certain volumes before we can switch the on button over there,
Hmm.
right? Otherwise, these none of these deals are not happening. The AI companies struggling with certain types of data that they need, they'll find it one way or another. Maybe they take time. They'll, not do some things maybe. And we're talking
Hmm.
about all the players we work with. Most of them are, they want the rights. That's the main thing they're coming to us for.
You're talking about the AI companies.
The AI companies, yes, they want
Yeah, yeah.
they want rights, and they want official rights,
Is
and
it
that.
just AI companies though, or is it like others that are sort of interested in? I don't know. You tell me if it's that there's other sort of layers to that.
So most of it is, again, that's what we specialize in. It's the AI side, which can
Hmm.
include large language models, which includes, now we work with some of the leading voice AI companies across
Okay.
different use cases. And hopefully, we'll keep releasing some of those things as they come along. The goal remains the same. Like, we had a new opportunity with some of our voice partners, one of our voice partners, for a completely unexpected opportunity for the publisher. Like, how is this happening? They want to license my content for what? So the
Hmm.
thing is, there's constantly new emerging use cases. I think that's what you might be referring to within the AI
Yeah.
space, right? But the driving factor for that, Pete, a lot of times, is a lot of traditional businesses are also now adopting AI, and they need different types of rights. To look at
Hmm.
media monitoring as an example, right? If you're using AI
Sure.
on your side, you need different types of rights, right? So most of almost everything we do is AI related. It's just that, but the verticals keep expanding. That's the exciting part.
Yeah, totally. As you were talking about the media monitoring, I actually part of my business is teaching PR professionals about how to use AI, and obviously I have relationships with some of the sort of bigger PR monitoring platforms, and I've gotten some downloads on sort of what they're doing, and even when you get into zero in on like the business intelligence platforms and stuff like that that need just like a lot of data and the rights to it in order to apply AI to
Right.
it. There's just it gets complicated pretty quickly. And to your point about, I really appreciated the thing where you can't just do these one-to-one things. They're not, bigger companies aren't even equipped for that, right? Like you don't want to have a big drop down with 500 things and need to be able to select or whatever. I mean, not that that's the UI, but you know what I mean. So yeah, like I greatly appreciate the scale um, part of your name. Now, can you go elaborate a little bit on sort of your unique relationship with Perplexity? Because I think that's something I'd really love to unpack.
Right.
They've been a player for a little while. Obviously, there's a lot of interest in it. I keep hearing about how it's down for the count, and then they come back with some cool feature, and I keep hearing more from my peers about how they're still using it and even using the more advanced features. So
Right.
tell me a little bit about that, and then maybe I could get a little bit on the detail on why it's unique.
Yeah, absolutely. So Perplexity is again one of our many amazing partners. We've been working with them since the very early, maybe last year at this time. And again, we have been very excited. Our goal remains to bring opportunities for publishers, and this is in that realm. I want to highlight that we always try to maintain, or we are maintaining, like a Switzerland like neutral structure, because as I said, the key differentiator of ours is we've realized that in order to get the opportunities to the publishers, you can't it's not it cannot be a one-sided thing, right?
Mm,
Because eventually the ones that are partnering, they will have to talk anyways, even if to try to do the one-on-one deal. Some of our partner publishers are like, yes, we've sued these partners, that's totally okay. Some of them are like, yeah, we don't want to work on this, that's fine. We would be doing a disservice if you were very selective on we work with this company or not. So it was very
of course.
exciting to work on that. We helped deliver the publisher program, which again, some of our publishers were like, oh, this is great. Others are like, no thanks. So it's not our job to make that judgment. It is like, here's this opportunity. And we work very early on because of our ability to kind of deliver partnerships and kind of bring both sides together. Where it's pretty unique is that again, we're the only third party that they've worked with on this, and as
Mhm,
it's been shared last summer, it was shared that we were very excited. We still are very excited about the element of providing more transparency to the publishers on how their content is being surfaced. That was shared that
mhm,
ScalePost will be like the
yeah.
conduit for providing that. So for us, that again goes back to maximizing value and bringing additional opportunities to publishers and content owners. So that's the unique nature of that, where we're the only kind of third party that they're going to be opening up their weblogs to. So our that the publisher partners can get a lot more detailed information on how their content is surfacing.
Yeah, can we nerd out on that for just a minute? Like, I really like because I feel like this is a brand new area of where the fundamentals are. Maybe they're well, you would know you would whether they're being figured out or not. I haven't figured them out. I'll confess that right now. Which is to say, like, what sort of analytics do you provide? What is like considered a success here, and like what even other extraneous factors or extra like things beyond the numbers is what I'm getting at as to um when you are judging the success of having a publisher partnership with sort of an AI company in summaries, right? Because whenever I talk about this, it's like, the question sometimes I often get is like, well, how do I rank, in an AI summary? And I think, well, you need to back up a step, right? Because it's like one is like kind of like, why would you want to? Like, you got to get your fundamentals right on it. So, can you speak to like the fundamental, like just sort of the fundamental change of this
Right.
versus like the old Web 2.0 world, and then get into some of the like key KPIs, I guess, honestly, on what
Right.
what success looks like there.
That would just again way beyond Perplexity, just search AI, right? Where
Yeah.
search AI is constantly changing. It's a challenge, you know, Google itself also faces, right? Like if there's not many blue links, people get their answers elsewhere. So that whole dynamic is really shifting in front of us. The key differentiator being that, if you're a content publisher and your content surfaces, you're not getting the clicks anymore. The CPMs
Hmm.
are suffering, and you built your whole business around that asset, right? But that's no longer getting that traffic, right? Of course, that dynamic is very obviously being, um, disrupted. Where the going back to the metrics, some of the metrics we look at are, for example, a lot of partners are like, well, is this going to offset if I get revenue from so and so AI player for use of my content for summarizing? Is this going to somehow offset my subscription revenues? And there's no direct obvious answer.
Right.
But there's things like, for example, one of the metrics we've seen is, if we can, like, percentage of annual revenue. Here's this one deal that you got. What percent of your revenue could this look like? Here's how many views you got. I mean, not views, we call it surfacing, or we call it, if you showed up in a search AI 100,000 times, you can call them impressions. Surfacing is more important because impressions are still something that's lighter. Your link showed up there
Right.
somewhere, right? So is that equivalent to a CPM? Not really. There's other metrics that we're kind of behind the scenes calculating, because we do get data on, like, here's how this data got priced, here's how that data got priced. And I want to add to that when we go to a partner and there's some, let's say they have multimodal assets on video and audio and images, that's a completely additional opportunity that is not was even they didn't even think about it. So most of the video and
Hmm.
audio content we're looking at, for example, for a news media style publisher or bigger publishers, it has never been essentially licensed by AI, right? And frankly, it's not even easy to
Yeah.
scrape. So those are like additional opportunities that you're seeing, which changes the framework a little bit from not just the search AI side. Of course, that's a massive component, right? A big chunk of people are going to Perplexity and search Gemini and ChatGPT. Um, but we try and show the whole picture on there's these new opportunities as well, because that's our main job, right?
Hmm.
In terms of other metrics, it's still early days on how we
Hmm.
quantify or evaluate, here's this pricing from a certain AI company on a pay-per-use basis. Is this going to be a net positive for your business yet or not? It's still the early days. We need a lot more
Hmm.
data as a market to be able to go to publisher and say, this would be optimal for you to take or not take, or here's how much you should set your pricing for.
Right. Right. And more data comes in on that every day. But like to your point, it just seems like there's no set standard on any of this stuff yet. That said, we are getting some data, and I recently hosted a webinar with an industry peer, and we talked about AI substitution risk, so to speak, to publishers, which is to say, what content that you're serving up is potentially most at risk, and that a query might an answer to a query might serve the need, as opposed to like actually going to the content itself. And there were some sort of broad takeaways there on like what types of content that work, that are rather work like are more resilient
Right.
to sort of AI substitution. And a couple quick ones were like, just really top level were like, visual content, opinion content. um I'm just curious, are you looking at content in a similar way? And maybe you might phrase it differently than risk and resilience, but I mean, do you see patterns starting to emerge there on what a successful, quote unquote, successful content strategy might look like in an AI era? Like, even if it's just like a couple of broad takeaways, I think my audience would be really interested.
Absolutely. This is a really amazing point you touch on, and if you've been working on it, something behind the scenes, very excited about this is, so just to take a step back, when we integrate with the publisher, it's a very straightforward 15-20 minute, like, integration with their content delivery network. We have pretty much all the major names covered, and we get a lot of information on how all these bots are accessing their content, right? From the we have a massive library of hundreds of bots that any content owner should care about, from your new like the small LLM that's coming up and coming in Vietnam, to the ByteDances, to the big names naturally, right? And we really segregate on, okay, here's the training bot. This is downloading data. Here you go. There's where it's going. This, what you're referring to, becomes what we're offering is when you have search AI and you know what pieces of your content precisely are being
Mhm.
surfaced in those categories. And then you take that and map that onto, here's my non human traffic, here's my bot traffic, this is what they're going. And here's my human traffic, and this is what they care about. This could
Mhm.
answer your question. And that's what I will say that, without going to too many weeds, is I think this might answer your question on trying to understand where then you can make different conclusions on that, right? You could say that,
Mhm.
oh, this stuff is really valuable from that AI company and they're paying me for pay per use. So this is great on that platform. Or it could tell you that, some of the search AI or AI companies care about these types of content, which now we want to protect. We don't want to give it away for free. Let's block this
Mhm.
out. So with a click of a button, you can say no. If you're not authorized, no thanks. You can't get access to that. And then you could make the risk or many other decisions
Mhm.
come out from that data essentially.
Yeah, I like that, and I particularly like sort of the framework that you're sort of setting it, which is less about the sort of risk of resilience and more like bot versus human. Because bot traffic is going to be is a thing and will continue to be a thing and probably very much a growing thing. And thinking about how the internet will evolve as to sort of be not quite maybe it's bifurcated, maybe that's the right to say think about it in terms of like doing stuff for robots sometimes and doing stuff for humans sometimes, and maybe those are sort of the buckets that people should think of. I think it's just sort of like we've traditionally had an economic system based around human activity,
That's right.
and now it's like the one around bot activity needs to emerge, and obviously you're a key part of that.
And
I'd like to move on a little bit, if you don't mind, to some of the sort of other headlines and ancillary effects around this space. So, just keeping with perplexity for a second, it always sort of surprises me a little bit that there's a lot of obviously there's a litigation in this area over copyright. A lot of that's going to be resolved in courts or regulators, and that's a bit of a ways off. But the biggest target is the biggest company, which is usually OpenAI.
yeah,
And Perplexity is garners its share of headlines, but it hasn't seemed like it's had the same proportion of lawsuits. Big exception, obviously, is News Corp. Um, why do you think that is? What do you attribute that to?
again, we can only speculate, and who, the the associations and the publishers suing, I mean, they're of course the eventual decision makers. um,
Mhm.
we always try and look at that. I think understanding the scale maybe is one answer, right? OpenAI naturally has a much bigger scale, and
Mhm.
there's also that bifurcation of they also do training as well as RAG. So there's two separate use cases that you can kind of contest on, right?
Right.
Whereas if you're a wrapper, or some other AI that's built on top of an existing LLM, you could kind of say that, well, I didn't train on this, So
Right.
there's
Right.
there's that element of just the scale and that bifurcation, because their bots behave very differently. We have
Mhm.
we have huge data on that naturally when with all the publishers we connected with. The the RAG bots will tell you something completely different. You're like, oh, some people are searching for my stuff on ChatGPT or one of these platforms, but training is training, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we see, I mean, it's insane. I don't know if you saw, like, Wikipedia recently shared that 65% of their most expensive traffic comes from the bots. Most of them are,
Oh
I mean,
wow.
they know their data, but it's probably training bots, and
Mhm.
that is something to pay attention to. And because it's sometimes for some AI companies, it's much easier, for example, for especially for training, to just scrape large volumes because it's just it's accessible, um, and that has a cost, especially for nonprofits, right? And like Texas Tribune is one of our, the earliest partners in this space, and they're a nonprofit. They are if they get a
Mhm.
lot of traffic and they're getting scraped, well, who's paying for it? So there's a big
Mhm.
question there. So there's that element as well, where training can cause a lot of kind of weight, and then RAG is completely different. Some publishers we talk to are like, well, we're not getting paid from so and so AI agents, but at least we're showing up. Others are like, no thanks, block them. And then
Hmm.
there's others that are getting paid because there's partnerships that we've been able to kind of move through. So again, my theory again goes back to that scale is
Hmm.
probably where if you're scraping on a very big volume and you have a lot more users and you have different use cases, chances are you know there's also more to kind of go after,
Yeah.
if there's litigation there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, scale is obviously a huge factor, but I do appreciate the difference between training and RAG, or I kind of use the I use the shorthand AI search just because
Right.
it seems familiar. But it's it to me it is a um to me it's a meaningful difference. It's not really like it's when a user just sits in front of a chatbot and asks for something, particularly chat gpt, because it didn't really start out as a search engine, even though it kind of was in its knowledge base, and then sort of evolved into that. They're just asking for stuff. And I guess I would wonder, like, from a publisher perspective, well, let forget the I want it from a market perspective is what I'm sort of thinking of it, right? Because I'm sort of keen in on a comment that I heard Atlantic CEO Nick Thompson say at a conference last year, where he was saying that the training data value has plummeted. It's gone down since the early days, I guess, of generative AI, and I kind of wondered why that is. And my read is just generally that um, it's the value of it is it's kind of already one and done, like a lot of it's already been ingested, and it's kind of almost like a defensive move to, again, I guess at this point, pay for it. And my later read is now that I feel like there's been some favorable signs, if not moves, that the regulators are sort of thinking about, like, oh, maybe training should be just fair use, and we should just let that go. And so because of those signs, maybe people are less willing to pay. I don't know. That's my read. I guess I'm kind of like, my question is bouncing that off you. Well, like, what's your perspective? What am I missing here?
Right.
And are you seeing the same pattern of kind of like, oh, the training data is maybe getting less valuable, but RAG still might have a better future there? I mean, what's your thinking?
So there's a few threads to put on here. Generally speaking, we have the same. We've seen this. This is the market. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Now we're trying to understand the reasons for it, right? And we have a front row seat into a lot of AI development, and we take pride in really understanding that, so we can unlock value for the publishers. For and again, this goes way beyond um, you know there's various categories we're in. So, for example, Charity Navigator. It's not news media. It's a very unique kind of publisher, and they have charity ratings. They we helped them do a big partnership. It's also announced last December, where it's new types of content as well. Their content is valuable for various use cases. Now, the question of training, a lot of it is, generally speaking, seems to be obvious, where it's a function of it has already been scraped, and it's
Hmm.
large part. It's a small part of a very large scrape off the internet, I guess, which a lot of these models have been doing for a long time. Not just the chat GPT, but there's a lot of open source models, and so that's there. On the specific current market trends, I don't. It depends on the kind of content, right? So, for example, in training, we're a multimodal company. Video and audio is early days still. You've seen a lot of video and audio models. They're not as great, and they have much bigger data challenges. Absolutely, really different challenges from text, right? So there's that side. But in text, what we see is um, RAG or search AI type use cases are more relevant for current ongoing information. News media, Reddit,
Hmm.
like Reddit and Google, when they did a deal, they didn't go to Reddit and say, you know what, we're going to scoop up everything you've got or pay you some small portion. It's very obvious when they do a $60 million a year for 3 years that the ongoing content is important, right? For
Right. For
for them.
sure.
Similarly, if you're producing new fresh content, which a lot of news media, that's what they do, right? Without that, how do you know what's going on in the world today? Right? Weather, there's news media, there's all this stuff happening in the world that is irreplaceable. There's nobody else who can do that, right? So in that case, RAG becomes more important ongoing basis. The AI in that case needs to know what's happening every day. Otherwise, remember the early days, we had a cutoff in all these models. That's,
Yeah, for
that's all
sure.
I know. So without that, that's what an AI model looks like. It's not as helpful for the average user, right? And then Training is more what we see specialized content right now, right? Pete, we always love having you on our Zooms. We do these Chatham House private
Hmm.
closed door type spots so people can kind of share things openly. I don't know if you've been
Yeah,
to
they're
the recent one.
fabulous.
We have a focus on academic and scientific content as well, right? That's more training. That's
Hmm.
specific. That's unique. A lot of it is a function of not just accessibility, but a lot of the players that have emerged after a certain point in time are like they'll either do it like through proper channels and license it or not
Hmm.
use it. This extends to Fortune 10 companies. This extends to like leading voice AI and video companies. There's a whole big category of ethical AI development.
Hmm.
There's companies like Moon Valley that do just that. They're like, we license it or we won't use it, right? And then there's a
Yeah.
lot of that. 11 Labs does it. There's so many other companies that do just that. And for
Yeah, I just
them,
had Tracy Mabry from Factiva on the podcast a bit ago. And they license everything.
right, exactly. So it's that's a huge market, and especially when you're looking at AI development at a scale, that's where the scale post part comes in. Where how do you do
Hmm.
that at scale? Now you want academic and scientific content. Are you going to knock on every door? How does that work, right? So for us, we have multiple things to offer publishers. Like here you go, connect. You protect your content. Here's all these details on how bots are accessing it. You can block them. Like I mentioned, there's a lot more features that
Hmm.
we're rolling out, and hey, so and so party is really interested in this type of content. You have like 87% of your content is like this. um let's get the ball rolling. So that's a very kind of specific deep dive into the use case based economy,
Hmm.
where training is more specific in text. In video and audio is more generic stuff is also still required. And then RAG and ongoing use cases, it's almost all about current content.
Yeah. And that, to your point, I think a lot of publishers now that specialize in evergreen content are feeling even more worried because of exactly what you were just sort of outlining, that this, the current stuff is absolutely necessary. But if it's, evergreen content certainly needs to be updated and
Right.
kept current, but it is less current generally as a sort of category. And I feel like this might have been part of, I have no idea because I don't have any inside information, but it's just a coincidence that we're recording this like just a day after Ziff Davis sued OpenAI. And again, there's other people who have sued OpenAI, New York Times most famously, but not as many who have made deals with OpenAI. So I
Yeah.
kind of was trying to sort of unpack why litigate rather than negotiate. And presumably they did, but one of the things that occurred to me, like Ziff's business model has a lot of evergreen content,
Right.
and so I wonder if they feel particularly threatened there. I don't know. I know this sort of goes back into content strategy, but I'm curious of basically on what your publisher partners think about the state of evergreen content in an AI mediated world. How does that keep going?
So again, the soup part, I don't know. It's everybody has their own strategy, and
Yeah.
our opinion has been, regardless of the to the partners that are, there's some very few who've sued. Others are
Hmm.
like, we're just waiting for everything, and then the third bucket, like, let's do something. The opportunity, kind of space. That's where we really shine. But our advice or our opinion usually is, well, we can't wait for regulation to sort itself out, right? It's not great. So in the meantime, you either have to
Hmm.
protect yourself, or and or monetize. So that's the goal. um in terms of evergreen content, as I said, where we're more interested in, pretty much most of the AI companies we work with are like, we want rights and we want them at scale for this type of content. And that will usually depend on a lot of factors on their side as well, right? Where if they're doing certain developments in certain, like, academic and scientific content, that will be very relevant if they want rights, even if it's like Texas Tribune. It's a not, for example, very different example. Free, non-profit, generally easily scrapable. We still have, they have partnerships, because just because it's free and accessible for everybody doesn't mean a commercial entity should get value from it, right? So there's that side as well. We're constantly unlocking kind of that value on the AI side. And in the meantime, again, there's always that protection side that you can use. You can block unauthorized access, no problem. It's as simple as some clicks, really.
Cool. So you mentioned earlier they got some new features on the way. You're obviously thinking about data. Like what? Give me a snapshot of what's the long term. Well, what you got in this works, and also sort of the long term vision for ScalePost.
So I think our vision is still pretty clear to us. This whole dynamic is changing in front of us every day. There's new AI agents coming up, and AI agent is a broad category, but companies that are operate as AI agents as well.
Hmm.
All that is changing in front of us, and the way that whole system, often we tend to always be a lot of times talking about the same players, right? A few OpenAI, Perplexity, but we're often not thinking about what's happening new in the future. That's we have a really clear-eyed vision on here's these new apps that keep coming up, and then we make inroads to work with them from day one on, like, you want access to content and data. um, let's bring opportunities back to our publishers, right? So the long term is we do see these agentic companies growing, and just like any other company that gets access to data and content, they also want that, right? But for that, they need that. If you can offer it somebody like a plug and play solution, that's what they want, right? So our focus is remains that we keep helping content companies thrive and unlock these opportunities. And that means an agent now wants, you know um, data on just certain companies from your articles. Or it
Hmm.
could be, this model is now training on a bunch of video, and then you have all these video assets, right? Or there's now we need podcast style audio, and you have that, right? So we keep unlocking it, not for the just for the existing players, the big names we work with, but the constantly emerging new applications that keep coming, and provide those agents like a plug and play solution to go just get whatever content they want and pay for it.
So that's all. That sound all makes sense. What is it? Project out 5 years for me. Like, and assuming that these trends continue, the bot traffic becomes significant, if not the dominant part of the internet. A lot of people are um, experiencing things through AI, and not just sort of going to websites and et cetera. Um, what does that look like? What scale post role in what how is journalism and publishing thriving in that world?
Right. So again, 5 years is a long time in this AI space.
Mhm.
Our I mean, again, we feel like we've made it seems to be even obvious, and we've even shown, when we started working last year with the companies, now there's a lot more of those AI companies, and also unique types, right? There's voice, there's video, there's real-time news access applications, there's all sorts of stuff going on. So we think that eventually, this will go much beyond the major things we're doing, and basically helping really any content owner maximize the Gen AI ecosystem, which means they have their asset, which is data and content, and that needs to get into the hands of a lot of different AI agents and LLMs and search AI. And then there's a lot of value added things that they need, like, for example, SEO, right? Like, or AI engine optimization. How do you know
Mm,
what works and what doesn't, right? So our infrastructure already kind of supports a lot of that side of things, and then there's content curation and generation. There's so many things. I mean, 5 years is a long time down the line.
yeah,
We want it to be almost like, I mean, one can hope and dream. We want it to be almost like an indispensable part for a news media company to be like, this platform just does all this stuff for me, and we're protected, we have revenue opportunities, and we're thriving.
yeah.
Hopefully that's the future we get towards.
I feel like not to. I don't want to end on a down note or anything, but I feel like the protection, which you could come back to a few times, is such a important part because a lot of people are, if you project out 5 years and you being real about it, there's AI in the West, and then there's China, and then it's like there's
Right.
this whole arms race and who's going to dominate. And a big argument that gets made a lot is that, well, China, if we get too in our own heads about copyright, I guess it's like China's just going to ignore it, and they'll do better. I guess I'd ask whether you believe that or not. But more to the point, is like, what does protection mean? You know what I mean? Like, how do you? I guess it's more like enforcement, so to speak. Like,
Right.
how do you ensure bad actors who don't respect copyright are prevented from either stealing publisher content or money or what have you? And is it a futile exercise in some ways? I don't know.
So I think with the explosion of growth, right, where whatever somebody scraped is what they've scraped, but we can change that today, right? With block
Mhm.
again, we have a pretty technical view on that and how we block the bots, and you're very free to choose, what you want to block and what you don't. We also help identify. We have a really hundreds of active bots that we've said, here's what's dangerous, and technically it's very effective. The broader uh, question on where it has to be effective. Take a little bit of step back where I learned this from very early on, thankfully. I don't know if you ever met Rajiv. Rajiv's been a very early technology advisor to us. He's the ex-CTO of New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and Condé and Hearst. So we have a very strong news media in our DNA. And
I'm sure we've met at a conference somewhere, but
right,
yes.
right, right. So Rajiv Kant, he's great. He's a great guy, and he's been with us since very early days, essentially. And we learned it's very interesting because he's built some of these systems, and he was at New York Times when they were doing all this. They brought the whole paywall and everything. He was a CTO at that time. An interesting thing there is, like, if you look at especially news media, it is your job to be at the very edge of the internet, be available for everybody, even if you have a paywall, right? The example Rajiv
Mhm.
gave was like, well, we had paywalls and everything, but still, some election coverage we would just make free, right? And
Mhm.
so you're not sitting in some vaulted fortress, and that has worked to your disadvantage, unfortunately, right? So
Mhm.
but if you had that vaulted fortress, or literally like a paywall for everybody who comes in, just like a human does, even then people can really read what they want, but that's one human, right? That's not a large company benefiting from that, right? It can't be perfect, but when you create that friction and that system, it is very, very hard. And when you look at, for example, like Thomson Reuters, there's all these companies that own these legal databases. They're not really getting scraped. It's. I mean, I can't speak for their
Mhm.
systems, but they're vaulted B2B enterprise systems. Somebody needs a login and two-factor and go in. News media can't do that, unfortunately, right? So
Mhm.
it should be the next best, like the best possible digital paywall for the actual bots to be like, not only are you not paying me for this when I don't want you, I mean, you might want SEO bots, you might want Ahrefs and all that stuff, but there's bots that you're like, well, I'm not getting any value from this, and you're clogging my servers. Look at Wikipedia, right?
Mhm.
No thanks, right? So you drop your cost as well, and you protect the content. So again, I want to highlight, it's not
Right.
100% bulletproof. No system in the world, we see, whatever, one third of people, American social security is, been hacked, and it's just all this stuff can still happen, but that the ease of access, it just drops drastically. It's near impossible to like just automatically just go get the content, and that's the intent of that blocking, to give you that hard paywall like you would for like humans in general.
Nice. Just to end on one more question. What has been the biggest change that you've seen since generative AI came on the scene with regard to content publishing and the relationships here?
I mean, there's a lot of changes. So we started seeing, when we initially started, there's naturally a lot of trauma, especially in news media, from their past experiences. When the internet came in, and then Google happened, and Meta happened. So a lot of that was been, very initially, that was always what we got. But there's a lot of fear, right? I mean, from our perspective, we've seen a lot of the folks, with the right tools and opportunities, kind of move from the fear. There's an fear here, then there's opportunity, right? And
Right.
you kind of move more towards the opportunity side. That's just our observation. And it's a very specific answer to a broad question. Of course, there have
Yeah.
been changes. That's what
No, no,
we
no.
feel, and we're kind of here for that. Again, we still offer protection. If you don't, that's the base. I feel like and then analytics. Like, no publisher would be
Mhm.
like, I have no idea how many humans come to my website. I don't really know where they go, right? That applies
Right.
to bots right now. Nobody would do that. But if you look at the traffic is increasing, it should be a tool in your tool belt for sure.
For sure. Yep. Shift from fear to opportunity. That's a good first step for building that 5-year out feature in a good way.
Right.
Ahmed, Malik, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Pete. Pleasure to be here.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Ahmed Malik of ScalePost. If you enjoyed the episode, I'd appreciate it if you'd take just a minute to leave a rating or review for the Media Copilot in your podcast app. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Media Copilot newsletter and check out MediaCopilot.ai for our classes on AI for journalists, PR professionals, and communicators. Be seeing you in the future.